As the world quiets and the stars begin their gentle watch over the night, let us drift back through time to a land where mountains whisper ancient secrets and the sea hums tales of forgotten voyages. Picture a place where empires rose like the sun over golden plains, only to fade into the soft shadows of history. This is Spain, a land woven from threads of conquest, culture, and quiet resilience. Tonight, we'll wander through its past, not with the rush of a scholar's pen, but with the slow, soothing rhythm of a story meant to carry you toward sleep. Imagine yourself standing on a windswept cliff, gazing out at the Mediterranean's endless blue. The air carries the faint scent of olive groves and the distant echo of hooves on cobblestone. Spain's history is not just a timeline of kings and battles. It's a tapestry of human dreams, painted with the colors of courage, sorrow, and hope. From the first footsteps of ancient tribes to the gilded halls of monarchs, this land has seen the tides of time reshape its soul. Our journey will take us through forgotten caves where early humans left their mark, through the clash of Roman legions and Visigoth warriors, to the intricate courts of Al-Andalus, where poets sang under starlit skies. This is not a story to keep you awake with startling twists, but one to cradle you into rest, letting the gentle cadence of history lull your mind. Each chapter of Spain's past unfolds like a soft wave lapping at the shore, inviting you to sink deeper into its embrace. Whether you're here to learn or simply to drift, let the words guide you to a place of peace, where the past feels as comforting as a warm blanket. Hello, this is Sherry, and welcome to my channel. So let's begin. Close your eyes and imagine a world where time moves as slowly as a river carving its way through ancient stone. This is Iberia, the land we now know as Spain, in an era so distant it feels like a whisper from the earth itself. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of wild thyme and damp moss, while the sun spills golden light over rugged mountains and vast plains. Long before the clash of swords or the rise of empires, this peninsula was a cradle of life, where early humans wandered under boundless skies. As you settle into this tale, let its gentle rhythm wrap around you like a soft blanket, guiding you toward the quiet embrace of sleep. In the northern folds of Iberia, some 40,000 years ago, our earliest ancestors found refuge in caves carved by nature's patient hand. The caves of Altamira, nestled in the green hills of Cantabria, hold their secrets like a sacred trust. Picture a small band of hunters, their faces weathered by wind and sun, gathered around a flickering fire. By its trembling light, they painted on the rough stone walls vivid images of bison, deer, and wild horses, their forms leaping across the rock. These were not mere drawings but acts of reverence, a way to honor the animals that sustained them. Each stroke of ochre and charcoal was a prayer, a plea to the unseen forces that governed their world. The air in the cave was cool and heavy, the silence broken only by the crackle of the fire and the soft scrape of tools against stone. These early artists, clad in furs, left behind a legacy that still speaks to us, a testament to their awe of the world around them. As the millennia turned, the great ice sheets that once gripped the land began to retreat, leaving behind a softer, more forgiving Iberia. Forests of oak and pine spread across the hills, and rivers swelled with clear water, teeming with fish. By 6000 BCE, the Neolithic age had dawned, and the people of Iberia began to change. No longer content to follow the herds, they learned to coax life from the soil. In small clearings, they planted barley and wheat, their hands sinking into the earth as they sowed the first seeds of settlement. Along the coasts, they wove nets to pull shimmering fish from the sea, while inland, they herded goats and sheep, their lives now tied to the rhythm of seasons. In places like Los Millers, in what is now Altamira, early villages rose, their stone walls a quiet promise of permanence. These were fragile communities, built on trust in the land and guarded against the uncertainties of the wild. The people of this time left behind more than just walls. They crafted pottery, its surfaces etched with patterns that spoke of their connection to the earth. Burial mounds, filled with offerings of tools and jewelry, dotted the landscape, each one a silent tribute to those who had passed. Imagine standing beside one of these mounds at dusk, the sky painted with hues of lavender and gold, the air heavy with the weight of memory. These early Iberians were not just surviving. They were weaving stories into the land, stories that would linger long after their fires had gone cold. By the Bronze Age, around 2000 BCE, new peoples arrived, their footsteps echoing across the peninsula. The Iberians settled along the eastern and southern coasts, their villages thriving on trade and craftsmanship. They worked bronze into tools and ornaments, their jewelry gleaming like the sun on the Mediterranean waves. In the north and west, the Celts built hill forts, their stone enclosures rising like crowns on the landscape. Picture a Celtic village at twilight, the glow of hearths casting shadows on faces as elders recounted tales of gods and warriors. The Celts wove intricate patterns into their metalwork, their lives steeped in rituals that honored the cycles of sun and moon. These were not just tribes, but a tapestry of cultures, each adding its own colors to Iberia's story. Trade began to bind these scattered peoples, as amber from the north and obsidian from distant islands passed through calloused hands. In the south, the Tartessians emerged, a people whose wealth and mystery would later inspire Greek poets. Their cities, now lost to time, stood along the banks of rivers like the Guadalquivir, their markets alive with the hum of barter. Silver from their mines gleamed in the sun, drawing traders from far-off lands. Imagine a Tartessian merchant standing at the edge of a bustling port, his eyes scanning the horizon for sails, his heart filled with the promise of wealth. This was a land of possibility, where the mountains and rivers cradled the dreams of those who walked its paths. Yet, as these early peoples built their lives, the world beyond Iberia was stirring. Across the sea, new voices carried tales of distant shores, and the promise of trade brought strangers to these coasts. The land, once quiet, began to hum with the footsteps of outsiders, their ships cutting through the morning mist. What would these newcomers bring to Iberia's ancient soil? Would they come as friends, or would their arrival mark the beginning of a new chapter, one written in ambition and change? But as the stars wheeled above, a new people approached, their ships slicing through the mist as the stars shimmer over Iberia's quiet shores. Imagine standing on a rocky cliff, the sea stretching endlessly before you, its waves whispering secrets of distant lands. The Bronze Age sun casts a warm glow across the peninsula, where villages of stone and earth hum with the rhythms of daily life. But now, new shadows appear on the horizon, sails, taut against the wind, carrying strangers from across the Mediterranean. These are the Phoenicians and Greeks, maritime wanderers whose arrival will weave new threads into Iberia's ancient tapestry. Let their story unfold slowly, like the tide creeping up the shore, lulling you deeper into the embrace of this gentle tale. The Phoenicians, hailing from the sun-scorched cities of Tyre and Sidon in what is now Lebanon, were masters of the sea. Around 1100 BCE, their sleek ships, laden with purple-dyed cloth and glittering trinkets, found Iberia's southern coast. They were drawn by whispers of silver and tin, treasures hidden in the rivers and hills. Picture a Phoenician trader, his cloak billowing in the salty breeze, standing on the deck as his ship glides into a sheltered bay. The locals, perhaps Tartessians with bronze-tipped spears, watch warily from the shore, their curiosity mingling with caution. These newcomers brought more than goods. They carried the seeds of change. One of their earliest outposts was Gadir, known today as Cadiz, a city that claims to be among the oldest in Europe. Imagine its early days, a cluster of low, whitewashed buildings nestled against the sea, their walls warmed by the sun. The Phoenicians built trading posts, not fortresses, their markets alive with the clink of metal and the murmur of bartered deals. They traded glass beads, ivory, and wine for Iberia's raw wealth, silver from the mines of Huelva, copper from the mountains. Their alphabet, one of the first in the world, scratched onto clay tablets, began to influence the locals, planting the roots of written language. Picture a young Iberian apprentice, squatting beside a Phoenician scribe, learning to etch symbols that would carry his people's stories beyond the spoken word. The Phoenicians were not alone. By the 8th century BCE, Greek sailors, their ships painted with bold eyes to ward off evil, began to arrive. From city-states like Phakia, they sailed west, seeking new markets and fertile lands. On Iberia's eastern coast, they founded impurities, a settlement where olive trees and vineyards would soon flourish. Imagine a Greek colonist, his hands stained with soil, planting the first vines under a sky streaked with clouds. The Greeks brought their gods, Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, and their stories, which mingled with Iberian tales around flickering hearths. Their pottery, adorned with scenes of heroes and myths, became prized treasures, traded deep into the interior. These newcomers transformed Iberia, not with swords but with ideas. The Phoenicians introduced coinage, small discs of metal that changed hands in bustling markets, replacing the barter of old. They taught the locals to work iron, forging stronger tools and weapons. The Greeks, meanwhile, shared their knowledge of architecture and agriculture, their settlements growing into towns with stone-paved streets. Picture a marketplace in Imperi's at midday, the air thick with the scent of olive oil and fresh bread, where Iberian farmers haggle with Greek merchants, their voices rising and falling like a soft melody. This was a time of connection, where cultures met and mingled, each leaving its mark on the other. Yet this was not a land of perfect harmony. The newcomers' wealth drew envy, and their outposts were sometimes eyed with suspicion. Iberian tribes, proud of their hill forts and traditions, occasionally clashed with these outsiders, their spears flashing in the sun. But more often, they learned from one another. The Tartessians, in particular, grew rich from trade, their cities glowing with prosperity. Greek and Phoenician myths began to weave into Iberian beliefs, creating a tapestry of shared stories. Imagine a Tartessian elder, sitting by a fire, telling a tale of a Phoenician sea god to wide-eyed children, the flames casting shadows that dance like waves. As centuries passed, these coastal settlements became beacons of a new Iberia, one linked to the wider world. Ships sailed back and forth, carrying not just goods but ideas, philosophies, technologies, and dreams. The peninsula, once a quiet land of tribes, was now a crossroads, its shores alive with the hum of possibility. But the world beyond was growing restless. Far to the east, a city of soldiers and senators was rising, its gaze turning toward the riches of Iberia. What would happen when their legions set foot on these shores, their sandals crunching on the same sand where Phoenician ships once anchored? Yet across the sea, a greater power stirred, its legions marching toward Iberia's shores. As the night deepens and the world grows still, imagine standing on a dusty plain in Iberia, the air warm with the scent of sun-baked earth and wild lavender. The year is around 218 BCE, and the peninsula, once a patchwork of tribes and trading posts, now hums with the distant tread of disciplined boots. The Romans have arrived, their crimson cloaks billowing like storm clouds on the horizon. Their ships, heavy with soldiers and ambition, anchor in the harbors once claimed by Phoenicians and Greeks. This is the beginning of Hispania, Rome's name for Iberia, a land that will be reshaped under the weight of an empire's dreams. Let this story unfold gently, like a river smoothing stones, carrying you deeper into the quiet folds of history. The Romans came not as traders, but as conquerors, drawn by the same silver and copper that lured the Phoenicians. Their arrival was sparked by the Second Punic War, a clash with Carthage, a Phoenician-born power that had claimed much of southern Iberia. Picture a Carthaginian general, perhaps Hannibal himself, standing atop a hill, his war elephants trumpeting in the distance as he plans his march on Rome. The Romans, unyielding, responded with force, landing at Imperies in 218 BCE. Their legions, with gleaming helmets and tightly packed shields, moved like a tide across the land. The Iberian tribes, fierce in their hill forts, resisted, their slings and spears no match for Rome's relentless discipline. Battles raged along the Ebro River, the clash of iron echoing through valleys as the sun sank low. By 206 BCE, after years of bloodshed, the Romans had driven Carthage from Iberia. But conquest was only the beginning. They set about binding the land to their will, carving it into provinces: Tarraconensis, Baetica, Lusitania. Imagine a Roman engineer, his tunic dusted with chalk, surveying a landscape for roads that would stretch like arteries across the peninsula. These roads, paved with stone and ambition, linked new cities: Hispalis, now Seville; Emerita Augusta, now Merida, where temples and forums rose under the Mediterranean sun. Aqueducts, like the one still standing in modern Lisbon, carried water across valleys, their arches a testament to Rome's unyielding vision. Picture a farmer, once a tribesman, now tilling fields under Roman law, his life reshaped by taxes and order. The Romans brought more than stone and steel. They brought their language, Latin, which seeped into the tongues of Iberians and Celts, laying the roots of Spanish. They brought their gods, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, whose statues gazed over bustling markets. They introduced the olive press and the vineyard, transforming Iberia's hills into patchwork fields that still define Spain's landscapes. In cities like Tarraco, now Tarragona, amphitheaters echoed with the roars of gladiators and the cheers of crowds, while bathhouses steamed with the chatter of citizens. Imagine a merchant in Corduba, now Cordoba, weighing coins stamped with the emperor's face, his stall laden with amphorae of wine and oil, traded as far as Rome itself. Yet this transformation was not without pain. The tribes of the north, especially the Cantabrians and Asturians, clung to their ways, their mountain strongholds defying Roman rule. Picture a warrior, his face painted with woad, hurling stones from a cliff as Roman legions advance below. It took decades, until 19 BCE under Emperor Augustus, for Rome to fully claim the peninsula. Even then, the cost was heavy, villages burned, families torn, traditions faded. But Rome's embrace was also a promise of stability. Cities grew, their streets alive with the clatter of carts and the laughter of children. Temples to Roman gods stood beside older shrines, a quiet blending of faiths. Hispania became a jewel in Rome's crown, its mines pouring silver into the empire's coffers, its fields feeding distant legions. Senators from Hispania, like Trajan, born in Italica, would one day rule as emperors, their names carved in marble. Imagine a young boy in Hispania, listening to his father speak Latin, dreaming of a future in Rome's grand forums. The peninsula was no longer a distant frontier, but a heartland of empire, its people woven into a vast tapestry of cultures stretching from Britain to Egypt. But Rome's grip, strong as it seemed, was not eternal. As centuries passed, cracks began to show, overtaxed provinces, restless borders, and whispers of decline. In Hispania, the cities thrived, but the northern hills remained wild, their people never fully tamed. The empire's wealth masked a growing fragility, and far to the north, beyond the Pyrenees, new shadows gathered. Tribes with strange names, driven by hunger and ambition, watched Rome's borders weaken. What would happen when their hooves thundered across the mountains, bringing a storm to Hispania's ordered world? But as Rome's star began to wane, a storm of hooves thundered from the north as the night wraps the world in a velvet hush. Imagine standing on a windswept hill in Hispania, where the fading light of Rome casts long shadows across the land. The year is 410 CE, and the once mighty empire is faltering, its cities quieter, its roads cracked by time. The air carries the scent of olive groves and the distant clang of iron, but a new sound rises, a low rumble of hooves, the murmur of voices speaking strange tongues. The Visigoths, a Germanic people driven by war and wanderlust, have crossed the Pyrenees, their arrival marking the twilight of Roman rule. Let this story unfold like a soft fog settling over the hills, drawing you gently into the past, toward the peace of sleep. The Visigoths were no strangers to Hispania. They had come first as allies of Rome, hired swords to guard the empire's fraying edges. But as Rome weakened, its legions recalled to defend a crumbling heart, the Visigoths saw opportunity. Picture a warrior, his cloak heavy with dust, his sword scarred from battle, leading his people through mountain passes. They were a people forged in migration, their lives shaped by the need to find a home. By 418 CE, they had settled in Hispania, granted land by a desperate Rome in exchange for loyalty. The Romans called them foederati, allies, but the Visigoths had their own dreams of a kingdom carved from the empire's bones. Their early years were marked by struggle. Hispania was a fractured land, its Roman cities still clinging to old ways, while other Germanic tribes, like the Vandals and Suebi, carved out their own domains. Imagine a Roman governor in Tarraco, his villa crumbling, watching as Visigoth chieftains negotiated with local elites. The Visigoths, led by kings like Euric, began to consolidate power, their rule spreading from the Ebro Valley to the southern plains. By the late 5th century, they had established a kingdom centered in Toledo, its stone walls rising like a promise of stability. Picture Toledo at dusk, its narrow streets lit by torchlight, where Visigoth nobles in fur-trimmed cloaks mingled with Roman landowners, their languages blending in the evening air. The Visigoths were Christians, but their Arian faith set them apart from Hispania's Roman Christians, who followed the Nicene Creed. This divide cast a shadow over their rule, like a storm cloud hovering on the horizon. Imagine a small church in a rural village, where a priest whispers prayers in Latin, while nearby, an Arian bishop preaches to Visigoth warriors. The tensions simmered, but under King Leovigild in the 6th century, the Visigoths sought to unify their kingdom. Leovigild, a ruler of iron will, fought to subdue rival tribes and rebellious nobles. He minted coins bearing his likeness, a nod to Roman tradition, and built a court in Toledo that echoed the grandeur of lost emperors. Picture a royal hall, its walls hung with tapestries, where Leovigild's advisors debated laws to bind a diverse land. In 589 CE, his son Record took a bold step, converting to Nicene Christianity and uniting his people under one faith. Imagine the moment, a grand ceremony in Toledo's cathedral, the air thick with incense, as Visigoth and Roman knelt together, their differences softened by shared belief. This act wove the Visigoths into Hispania's fabric, their Germanic customs blending with Roman law and Iberian traditions. They adopted Latin as their tongue, their kings issuing codes that merged old tribal customs with Roman order. Villages grew into towns, their markets alive with the clink of coins and the chatter of merchants. Picture a farmer, his hands calloused from the plow, trading grain in a Toledo market, his life now governed by laws written in a language his ancestors never spoke. Yet the Visigoth kingdom was fragile, like a tapestry stretched too thin. Their kings, chosen by nobles rather than blood, faced constant challenges. Imagine a nobleman, his eyes sharp with ambition, plotting in a shadowed hall as rival factions whispered of betrayal. The countryside, too, was restless. Bandits roamed the hills, and famines bit deep. The Visigoths built churches and palaces, their stonework still visible in places like San Pedro de la Nave, but their rule was a delicate balance. They were neither fully Roman nor fully barbarian, caught mouthpiece of their culture, and this tension weakened their grip. Hispania, under Visigoth rule, was a land caught between worlds. Roman aqueducts still stood, but their channels ran dry in places. Visigoth warriors patrolled the roads, yet Roman villas decayed, overtaken by vines. The people lived in a twilight, their lives shaped by the echoes of Rome and the weight of a new age. Imagine a young girl in a Toledo street, watching a Visigoth horseman ride by, her world a blend of old and new, uncertain of what lay ahead. The kingdom stood, but its foundations were unsteady, its unity a fragile dream. And then, in the early 8th century, a new force appeared on the horizon. Across the Strait of Gibraltar, a crescent moon was rising, carrying the banners of a faith unknown to Hispania's shores. The Visigoths, divided and weakened, could not know the storm that was coming, a storm that would sweep their kingdom away like dust in the wind. Little did they know, a crescent moon was rising, carrying a new faith across the sea as the night settles deeper. Imagine standing on a sandy shore in southern Hispania, where the waves of the Strait of Gibraltar lap gently against the rocks. The year is 711 CE, and the air is heavy with the scent of salt and change. The Visigoth kingdom, once a fragile bridge between Rome's legacy and a new age, is crumbling under the weight of its own divisions. Across the narrow sea, a new force gathers, swift ships carrying warriors under a crescent banner, their eyes fixed on the shores of Iberia. This is the dawn of Al-Andalus, a chapter of Spain's story that will shine like a jewel in the annals of time. Let this tale unfold softly, like moonlight spilling across a quiet garden, guiding you toward the restful embrace of sleep. In the spring of 711, a Berber commander named Tariq ibn Ziyad landed at Gibraltar, a name derived from Jabal Tariq, the Rock of Tariq. Picture his army, a mix of Berber tribesmen and Arab leaders, their armor glinting under the Mediterranean sun as they step onto the rocky shore. The Visigoth king, Roderick, rallied his forces, but his kingdom was fractured by betrayal. At the Battle of Guadalete, the armies clashed, the air filled with the clash of swords and the cries of men. Roderick fell, his crown lost in the dust, and with him, the Visigoth realm unraveled. Within a few years, the Muslim forces swept across Hispania, their banners flying over cities from Toledo to Cordoba. Imagine a Visigoth noble fleeing through a burning village, his world collapsing as a new era begins. This conquest was not just a change of rulers but the birth of Al-Andalus, a land where Islamic culture would take root and flourish. By 756, Abd al-Rahman, a survivor of the fallen Umayyad dynasty, established an emirate in Cordoba, defying the distant Abbasid caliphs. Picture him, a young prince, standing in a palm-shaded courtyard, his vision of a new kingdom taking shape. Under his rule, Al-Andalus became a beacon of learning and beauty, its cities glowing like stars in the Iberian night. Cordoba, the heart of this realm, grew into one of the greatest cities of the medieval world, its streets alive with the hum of scholars, poets, and artisans. Imagine walking through Cordoba at its zenith in the 10th century, under the caliphate of Abd al-Rahman III. The Great Mosque, its arches a forest of red and white, rises like a dream against the sky. Its mihrab, adorned with golden mosaics, catches the light of flickering lamps, while the scent of orange blossoms drifts through open courtyards. Scholars from Baghdad and Damascus gather in libraries, their scrolls filled with knowledge of astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Picture a mathematician, hunched over a table, translating Greek texts into Arabic, his work preserving wisdom that would one day shape Europe. In the markets, merchants trade silk from Persia, spices from India, and paper, a new marvel, while poets recite verses under starlit skies, their words weaving tales of love and faith. Al-Andalus was a land of coexistence, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived side by side, their lives intertwined like the patterns in an intricate tile. Jewish philosophers like Maimonides wrote treatises that echoed across continents, while Christian scribes copied Arabic texts, preserving knowledge through the centuries. Imagine a Jewish merchant in Toledo, his shop filled with books, debating theology with a Muslim neighbor as a Christian bell tolls nearby. This was not a paradise. Taxes and laws favored Muslims, and tensions simmered, but it was a place where cultures met, creating a tapestry of ideas unmatched in its time. The countryside, too, was transformed. The Muslims brought irrigation techniques from the east, turning arid plains into lush fields. Orchards of oranges, lemons, and pomegranates bloomed, their colors vivid against the earth. Picture a farmer, his hands stained with soil, tending rows of almond trees, the sound of water flowing through channels a constant hum. These innovations fed cities and fueled trade, linking Al-Andalus to a vast network stretching from Morocco to Mesopotamia. Ships sailed from Altamira, their holds heavy with olive oil and ceramics, returning with treasures that enriched the caliphate's coffers. Yet, even in this golden age, shadows lingered. The Christian kingdoms in the north, small and defiant, clung to their rocky strongholds. In Asturias, tales of resistance grew, whispered in mountain villages where warriors sharpened their swords. Al-Andalus, for all its splendor, was not unchallenged. Raids from the north tested its borders, and internal rivalries among Muslim lords weakened its unity. Imagine a caliph in Cordoba, gazing from his palace window, his heart heavy with the knowledge that even the brightest jewel can crack under pressure. As the 11th century dawned, the caliphate began to fracture, splitting into taifas, small kingdoms ruled by ambitious emirs. Picture a poet in Seville, his verses tinged with melancholy, sensing the end of an era. The glory of Al-Andalus would endure in its art, its science, and its stories, but the north was stirring, its Christian kings dreaming of a reconquest that would reshape the peninsula. What would happen when their banners marched south, their crosses gleaming under the same sun that once lit the mosques of Cordoba? But even in this golden age, the north whispered of reconquest, a spark waiting to ignite. As the night deepens, Picture yourself atop a rugged hill in northern Iberia, where the wind carries the faint scent of pine and the distant toll of a church bell. The year is 718 CE, and the golden age of Al-Andalus shines in the south, its cities aglow with the light of learning and faith. But here, in the misty valleys of Asturias, a different story stirs, a tale of resistance, of small bands of warriors clinging to their Christian faith amidst the shadow of conquest. This is the beginning of the Reconquista, a centuries-long struggle to reclaim the peninsula from Muslim rule. Let this story unfold like a slow river winding through the mountains, its gentle current carrying you deeper into the past, toward the quiet refuge of sleep. In the rugged north, where the Cantabrian mountains rise like a spine against the sky, a Visigoth noble named Pellew kindled the first spark of resistance. Picture him, his cloak tattered, standing in a cave near Covadonga, rallying a handful of followers. The Battle of Covadonga in 718 was no grand clash but a desperate stand, where Pellew's men ambushed a Muslim scouting party in a narrow gorge. The rocks themselves seemed to fight for them, tumbling down to crush their foes. This small victory, whispered in villages and churches, became a legend, a sign that the Christian North would not bow. Imagine a shepherd, tending his flock under starlight, retelling the tale of Pellew's defiance, his words igniting hope in hearts worn by loss. From this spark grew the kingdom of Asturias, a fragile stronghold in a land of jagged peaks. Over decades, it expanded, its borders creeping south into the plains of Leon. Picture a stone-walled village, its wooden cross standing tall, where farmers and warriors knelt together, their prayers mingling with the smoke of hearth fires. By the 9th century, other Christian kingdoms emerged, Navarre in the Pyrenees, Aragon in the east, and later, Castile, born from Leon's heart. These were not unified realms but a patchwork of ambitions, their kings and nobles bound by faith yet divided by rivalry. Imagine a Navarrese knight, his armor dented, swearing loyalty to his king while eyeing the lands of his neighbors. The Reconquista was no swift crusade but a slow, grinding march, measured in generations. Muslim taifas, weakened by internal strife, faced raids from the north, their cities like Toledo falling one by one. Picture a siege at dusk, the air thick with dust and the cries of defenders, as Christian banners rise over battered walls. Yet this was not a simple clash of faiths. In the borderlands, Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived side by side, their lives intertwined in trade and truce. In Toledo, after its capture in 1085, Christian kings preserved Muslim libraries, their scribes copying Arabic texts by candlelight. Imagine a scholar, his fingers stained with ink, marveling at the wisdom of Al-Andalus, even as his king dreamed of conquest. Key figures shaped this era, their names echoing through the centuries. Alfonso VI, king of Leon and Castile, was a warrior king who claimed Toledo, his court a blend of Christian zeal and pragmatic diplomacy. Picture him riding through his new city, its mosques now churches, yet its markets still humming with Arabic voices. Then there was El Cid, Rodrigo Diaz, a knight whose legend outgrew his life. He fought for both Christian and Muslim lords, his sword a bridge between worlds. Imagine him, astride his horse, gazing across the Valencian plains he would conquer, his loyalty torn between faith and honor. His story, later immortalized in epic poems, spoke to a time when borders were fluid and allegiances shifted like sand. The Reconquista was also a time of cultural mingling. In Christian courts, troubadours sang of love and war, their melodies echoing the poetry of Al-Andalus. Muslim artisans crafted tiles for Christian palaces, their patterns swirling like the memories of Cordoba's glory. Picture a marketplace in Zaragoza, where a Christian merchant buys silk from a Muslim trader, their laughter rising above the clatter of carts. Yet, violence was never far. Raids and counter-raids scarred the land, leaving villages in ashes. Imagine a mother, clutching her child, hiding in a church as hooves thunder past, unsure if the riders are friend or foe. By the 12th century, the Christian kingdoms grew stronger, united by marriage and faith. The Almoravids and Almohads, Berber dynasties from North Africa, bolstered Muslim resistance, their armies sweeping north to challenge the Christian advance. Battles like Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212 marked turning points, where Christian kings stood together, their crosses gleaming against the dust. Picture a battlefield at dawn, the air heavy with the scent of blood and earth, as knights charge under a sky streaked with clouds. Victory here opened the south, bringing cities like Seville into Christian hands. Yet, the Reconquista was not just a war but a reshaping of Iberia's soul. Monasteries rose in the north, their stone walls shelters for pilgrims walking the Camino de Santiago. Imagine a weary traveler, his staff worn smooth, praying at a shrine under a starry sky, his journey a testament to faith. The Christian kingdoms grew, their borders pushing south, but the memory of Al-Andalus lingered in the land's art, its language, its very earth. As the 13th century dawned, two kingdoms, Castile and Aragon, rose above the rest, their crowns poised to unite. What would happen when their rulers, bound by marriage, forged a new Spain, their ambitions stretching beyond the peninsula to a world unknown? Yet, as the cross advanced, two crowns would unite, changing Spain's destiny forever. As the night wraps you in its quiet embrace, imagine standing in a candlelit hall in Castile, where the air hums with the scent of wax and the murmur of ambition. The year is 1474, and the Iberian Peninsula, scarred by centuries of war, stands on the cusp of a new dawn. The Reconquista has pushed the borders of Christian kingdoms southward, leaving only the Muslim emirate of Granada clinging to its southern hills. Two crowns, those of Castile and Aragon, are about to unite, forging a Spain that will reshape the world. This is the era of Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, whose reign will weave glory and shadow into the peninsula's story. Let this tale unfold like a tapestry unrolling in the moonlight, its threads guiding you gently toward the restful shores of sleep. Isabella of Castile, a young queen with a will of iron, ascended her throne amidst civil war, her claim challenged by nobles and rivals. Picture her, her golden hair braided beneath a simple crown, standing resolute in a Valladolid palace, her eyes fixed on a future only she could see. In 1469, she married Ferdinand of Aragon, a prince whose cunning matched her resolve. Their union was no mere alliance but a fusion of two powerful kingdoms, their banners entwined like vines. Imagine their wedding, a modest ceremony in a stone-walled chapel, where vows spoken in Latin promised not just love but a shared destiny. Together, they would forge a Spain united under one faith, one crown, and one ambition. Their first great task was the completion of the Reconquista. Granada, the last bastion of Al-Andalus, glittered in the south, its Alhambra palace a masterpiece of arches and fountains. Picture its courtyards, where jasmine scented the air and poets still sang of a fading golden age. Ferdinand and Isabella, driven by faith and the dream of unity, laid siege to Granada in 1491. Imagine the scene, Christian armies encamped on the plains, their tents a sea of white, while within the city Emir Boabdil faced a dwindling hope. The siege was long, the air heavy with the smoke of cannons and the prayers of both sides. In January 1492, Boabdil surrendered, his sigh, so legend says, echoing as he left the Alhambra forever. Picture him pausing on a hill, now called the Moor's Sigh, looking back at the city he lost, his heart heavy with the weight of history. With Granada's fall, Spain was united under Christian rule, its mosques turned to churches, its lands redistributed to loyal nobles. But the Catholic monarch's vision reached beyond conquest. They sought a Spain purified by faith, a land where one religion would bind all. In 1492, they issued the Alhambra decree, expelling Jews who would not convert. Imagine a Jewish family in Seville, packing their belongings by lamplight, their scrolls and memories tucked into bundles as they faced exile. Many fled to Portugal or North Africa, their contributions to Spain's culture carried away like leaves on the wind. Muslims, too, faced pressure to convert, their traditions fading under the shadow of the cross. Picture a Muslim artisan, his tools idle, whispering old songs as he kneels in a church, his heart torn between faith and survival. Yet 1492 was also a year of discovery. In a small port in Palos, a Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus knelt before the monarchs, his maps promising a new route to Asia. Picture him, his face weathered by sea and sun, boarding the Santa Maria, his crew's prayers mingling with the creak of wood. Ferdinand and Isabella, sensing the promise of wealth and glory, funded his voyage. When Columbus landed in the Americas, he claimed lands unknown to Europe, opening a new world to Spain's grasp. Imagine the first sight of those shores, emerald islands under a boundless sky, their people unaware of the ships that would change their fate. Gold and spices began to flow, filling Spain's coffers and fueling dreams of empire. The Catholic monarch's court became a beacon of power, their rule blending faith with pragmatism. They reformed laws, curbed rebellious nobles, and built a bureaucracy that tied their kingdoms together. Picture a scribe in Toledo, his quills scratching parchment, recording edicts that would shape a nation. They patronized scholars and artists, their palaces filled with tapestries and music, yet their inquisition cast a darker shadow. Imagine a merchant, accused of heresy, standing before stern inquisitors, his fate uncertain in a land where faith was both shield and sword. The Inquisition sought to root out dissent, its trials leaving scars on Spain's soul. Ferdinand and Isabella's legacy was a Spain transformed, a land united, devout, and poised to dominate the world. Their daughter, Joanna, would carry their bloodline forward, her marriage to a Habsburg prince linking Spain to Europe's great houses. Picture a young Joanna, her eyes distant, unaware of the storms her reign would face. The Catholic monarch's vision had built a nation, but it came at a cost. Communities exiled, cultures suppressed, and a new world's riches stained with exploitation. As their reign ended, Spain stood at a crossroads, its sails catching the winds of empire. The gold of the Americas glittered, promising wealth beyond dreams, but it also whispered of challenges to come. What would this new Spain become, as its ships crossed oceans and its ambitions soared, yet its heart bore the weight of its choices? But with glory came shadows, as a new world's wealth hid a darker cost. As the night weaves its quiet spell, imagine standing on the bustling docks of Seville, where the Guadalquivir River glitters under a twilight sky. The year is 1519, and Spain, newly united under the Catholic monarchs, stands at the pinnacle of its power. Ships laden with gold and spices crowd the harbor, their sails taut with the promise of distant lands. This is Spain's golden age, a time when its empire stretches from the sunlit coasts of the Americas to the spice-scented ports of Asia. Under emperors like Charles V and Philip II, Spain's banners fly across continents, but beneath the gleam of wealth lies a tide of ambition and sacrifice. Let this story unfold like a soft wave breaking on the shore, carrying you gently into the depths of history, toward the soothing embrace of sleep. The death of Isabella in 1504 and Ferdinand in 1516 left their legacy in the hands of their grandson, Charles V, a Habsburg prince whose rule would span an empire on which the sun never set. Picture him, a young man with a solemn gaze, crowned Holy Roman Emperor, his domains stretching from Spain to the Netherlands, Austria, and the New World. His court in Valladolid buzzed with envoys from distant lands, their voices mingling with the clink of goblets and the rustle of silk. Spain, now the heart of this vast empire, drew unimaginable wealth from the Americas. Imagine a ship unloading in Seville, its hold brimming with gold and silver from Mexico and Peru, the air thick with the scent of cedar and ambition. The mines of Potosi, high in the Andes, poured forth silver, transforming Spain into Europe's richest power. This wealth fueled a cultural flowering unmatched in Spain's history. In Toledo and Madrid, artists like El Greco painted canvases that glowed with spiritual fervor, their colors dancing like firelight. Picture a dimly lit studio, where El Greco's brush captures the anguish of saints, his work a bridge between earthly and divine. Writers, too, thrived, none more than Miguel de Cervantes, whose Don Quixote spun a tale of a dreamer tilting at windmills. Imagine a reader in a candle-lit tavern, chuckling over Quixote's misadventures, the story a mirror to Spain's own blend of idealism and struggle. Universities in Salamanca and Alcalá buzzed with scholars, their debates echoing through stone halls, while composers filled churches with music that soared like prayers. Yet this golden age was not just a time of art, but of conquest. Spanish explorers, driven by faith and greed, carved out an empire across the Americas. Picture Hernan Cortés, his armor gleaming, standing amidst the ruins of Tenochtitlan, or Francisco Pizarro, claiming the Incas' gold in Peru's highlands. These conquests brought riches but also devastation, as indigenous peoples fell to disease and sword. Imagine a native village, its homes empty, the air heavy with loss, as Spanish banners rise over a new world. The transatlantic trade, centered in Seville, linked continents, its galleons carrying not just gold but ideas, crops, and cultures. Potatoes and maize reached Spain's fields, while horses and wheat reshaped the Americas. Under Philip II, Charles's son, Spain's power peaked, but its burdens grew. Picture Philip in his austere palace at El Escorial, poring over maps by lamplight, his faith as unyielding as his ambition. He sought to defend Catholicism against the rising tide of Protestantism, sending the Spanish Armada in 1588 to challenge England. Imagine the Armada's ships, their sails proud, battling storms and English fire off the Channel's coast, only to limp home in defeat. The loss, though not fatal, marked a crack in Spain's invincibility. Wars drained the treasury. Against the Dutch, the Ottomans, the French, each coin spent a reminder of the empire's fragility. Spain's golden age was a paradox, a time of splendor and strain. In Madrid, now the capital, palaces rose, their walls adorned with tapestries from Flanders. Picture a courtly dance, nobles in velvet gliding to lutes, while outside, peasants toiled under heavy taxes. The influx of American silver sparked inflation, eroding wealth as prices soared. Imagine a merchant in Seville, his ledger showing losses, his dreams of prosperity fading like mist. The Inquisition, ever watchful, cast a shadow, its tribunals rooting out heresy with fire and fear. Picture a bookseller, hiding forbidden texts, his heart racing as inquisitors knock. Despite these tensions, Spain's influence endured. Its language and faith spread across the globe, shaping colonies from Manila to Mexico City. Missionaries built churches in distant jungles, their bells ringing where jaguars prowled. Imagine a friar, his robes dusty, teaching children under a palm-thatched roof, his words planting seeds of a new culture. At home, Spain's cities glowed with the legacy of Al-Andalus, their architecture a blend of arches and crosses. Picture a Granada evening, the Alhambra's silhouette against a violet sky, its beauty a reminder of a shared past. Yet even empires tire. By the late 16th century, Spain's coffers were strained, its armies stretched thin. Philip II's death in 1598 left a throne to weaker successors, their reigns shadowed by debt and defeat. The Golden Age's light began to dim, like a candle burning low. Picture a soldier, returning from a lost war, his boots worn, gazing at a Spain both grand and weary. The empire stood, but its foundations trembled, and whispers of decline grew louder. What would become of this nation, its glory built on gold yet weighed by its own ambitions? Yet, even empires tire, and Spain's golden light began to flicker. As the night folds you in its gentle hush, imagine standing on a windswept plaza in Madrid, where the stars gleam faintly above the rooftops. The year is 1640, and Spain, once the radiant heart of an empire, feels the weight of its own grandeur. The Golden Age's brilliance has faded, its gold spent, its armies weary from endless wars. Yet in the quiet streets and resilient hearts of its people, Spain endures, a land tempered by hardship and bound by memory. This is the story of Spain's decline, but also of its quiet strength, a tale that unfolds like a soft rain falling on ancient stones, lulling you deeper into the peaceful embrace of history. The seeds of decline were sown in the late 16th century, as Spain's vast empire stretched its resources thin. Under Philip II's successors, Philip III and Philip IV, the treasury bled dry, drained by wars in Europe and the costs of maintaining colonies from Peru to the Philippines. Picture a royal advisor in the Alcazar, his brow furrowed over ledgers, the flicker of candlelight revealing debts that outstrip the silver from American mines. Inflation, sparked by that same silver, gnawed at the economy, making bread dearer for peasants while nobles clung to fading wealth. Imagine a baker in Toledo, his hands dusted with flour, watching his customers dwindle as prices soar, his own table bare. Spain's military might, once unmatched, faltered. The 30 Years' War, raging across Europe, saw Spanish armies bogged down in the Netherlands and Germany, their victories fewer, their losses heavier. Picture a soldier, his cloak mud-stained, trudging through a Flemish field, far from the sunlit hills of Castile, his heart heavy with thoughts of home. The 1643 Battle of Rocroi, a defeat by the French, marked a turning point, Spain's invincibility shattered like glass. At home, rebellions flared, Catalonia and Portugal rose against Madrid's rule, their grievances fueled by taxes and neglect. Imagine a Catalan farmer, his pitchfork raised, shouting defiance in a village square, his voice mingling with the toll of church bells. Portugal, long united with Spain under the Habsburgs, broke free in 1640, reclaiming its independence after decades of resentment. Picture a Lisbon crowd, their faces alight with hope, raising a new king's banner as Spanish troops withdraw. These losses chipped away at Spain's empire, its borders shrinking like a tide receding from the shore. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 and the Treaty of the Pyrenees in 1659 cemented Spain's diminished role, ceding lands to France and others. Imagine a diplomat, his quill trembling, signing away territories once won with blood, the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. Yet decline was not collapse. Spain's people, from fishermen in Galicia to shepherds in Extremadura, showed a quiet resilience. Villages rebuilt after wars, their stone walls rising anew. Picture a widow in Andalusia, her hands calloused, tending an olive grove alone, her harvest a small act of defiance against hardship. In cities, artisans crafted ceramics and leather, their work traded in markets that hummed with life. The church, ever present, offered solace, its monasteries and cathedrals shelters for the weary. Imagine a pilgrim, his staff worn, praying in Santiago de Compostela, the scent of incense wrapping him in peace. Culturally, Spain still shone, its light softer but enduring. The Baroque era brought artists like Diego Velázquez, whose paintings captured the soul of a nation. Picture his studio, where a canvas holds the somber gaze of a king or the quiet dignity of a servant, each stroke a meditation on time's passage. Writers like Calderón de la Barca filled theaters with plays of honor and fate, their words resonating in packed houses. Imagine a Madrid audience, their eyes fixed on a stage, lost in a story that mirrors their own struggles. These works, born in a time of trial, carried Spain's spirit forward, a beacon for generations. The 18th century brought flickers of renewal under the new Bourbon dynasty, which replaced the Habsburgs after the War of Spanish Succession, 1701–1714. Philip V, a French-born king, centralized power, modernizing laws and trade. Picture a shipyard in Cadiz, its timbers echoing with hammers, as Spain rebuilds its navy to guard its colonies. Reforms sparked hope, but the empire was a shadow of its former self, its American territories coveted by rivals like Britain and France. Imagine a merchant in Havana, his eyes scanning the horizon for British sails, his heart torn between loyalty to Spain and fear of change. Spain's decline was a slow unraveling, yet its people clung to their traditions, their faith, and their land. Villages celebrated saints' days with dances and feasts, their joy a quiet rebellion against sorrow. Picture a Granada festival, the air alive with music, as families gather under lantern-lit streets, their laughter echoing off the Alhambra's ancient walls. This resilience, rooted in the soil of Iberia, carried Spain through its darkest hours, a testament to a nation that bends but does not break. But as the 18th century closed, new storms loomed. Across the Pyrenees, a revolutionary France stirred, its armies poised to sweep into Spain. The old world was crumbling, and a new Spain waited in the wings, ready to rise from the ashes of empire. What would this nation become as it faced the fires of invasion and the promise of rebirth? But as the old world crumbled, a new Spain stirred, ready to rise from its ashes. As the night cradles you in its gentle stillness, imagine standing on a quiet street in Madrid, where the first light of dawn brushes the rooftops with gold. The year is 1808, and Spain, weathered by centuries of empire and decline, stands at the threshold of a turbulent new era. The winds of change sweep across the peninsula, carrying the clash of muskets, the cries of revolution, and the promise of renewal. This is the story of Spain's journey into the modern age, a tale of struggle, resilience, and rebirth, woven like a tapestry from the threads of its ancient past. Let this final chapter unfold softly, like a breeze through an open window, guiding you toward the peaceful shores of sleep. The dawn of the 19th century brought upheaval. Napoleon's armies, marching under the banner of revolutionary France, crossed the Pyrenees, intent on reshaping Europe. In 1808, they occupied Spain, installing Napoleon's brother Joseph as king. Picture a Spanish village, its cobblestone square filled with defiant farmers and priests, their voices raised against foreign rule. The Peninsular War erupted, a brutal struggle where Spanish guerrillas, ordinary men and women, fought alongside British allies. Imagine a shepherd-turned-fighter, hiding in the Sierra Nevada, his musket ready, his heart burning with love for his homeland. By 1814, the French were driven out, but the war left Spain scarred, its cities battered, its people weary. The restoration of King Ferdinand VII promised stability, but his absolutist rule sparked division. Picture a liberal scholar in Cadiz, his pamphlets calling for a constitution, his dreams clashing with royal decrees. The 19th century became a tug-of-war between tradition and reform as Spain grappled with its identity. Revolts flared and colonies in the Americas, Mexico, Peru, Argentina, broke free, their independence draining Spain's last imperial wealth. Imagine a sailor in Cadiz watching ships return empty, his thoughts drifting to a shrinking empire. By 1898, the Spanish-American War saw Cuba and the Philippines lost to the United States, a final blow to Spain's global reach. Yet, amidst loss, Spain's spirit endured. The 19th century saw a cultural revival, as writers and artists sought to define their nation. Picture a cafe in Madrid, where poets like Gustavo Adolfo Bécquer penned verses of love and longing, their words echoing in smoky rooms. The generation of '98, thinkers like Miguel de Unamuno, wrestled with Spain's soul, their essays a lament for lost glory and a call for renewal. Imagine a student, his books open under lamplight, dreaming of a Spain reborn through ideas. In the countryside, traditions held firm, flamenco's mournful notes rang through Andalusian nights, and festivals filled villages with color. The early 20th century brought new tensions. Political unrest simmered, as monarchists, republicans, and anarchists vied for Spain's future. Picture a Barcelona factory, its workers striking under red banners, their demands for justice clashing with soldiers' bayonets. In 1931, the Second Republic was born, a fragile hope for democracy. But divisions deepened, and in 1936, the Spanish Civil War erupted, a brutal conflict that tore the nation apart. Imagine a battlefield in Aragon, where brothers fought brothers, the air thick with dust and despair. Francisco Franco's nationalists, backed by fascist powers, clashed with Republicans, supported by volunteers from across the world. Cities like Guernica burned, their ruins a testament to war's cruelty, immortalized in Picasso's anguished painting. By 1939, Franco's victory ushered in a long dictatorship. Picture a silenced Madrid, where dissent was whispered in shadows, and families mourned in secret. Franco's regime, rigid and repressive, sought to unify Spain under one vision, suppressing regional languages like Catalan and Basque. Yet, even under oppression, resilience flickered. Imagine a grandmother in Galicia teaching her grandchildren forbidden songs, her voice soft but unbroken. Spain rebuilt slowly, its economy limping through isolation, its people finding solace in faith and community. Franco's death in 1975 opened a new chapter. King Juan Carlos I, a quiet figure with a steady hand, guided Spain toward democracy. The 1978 Constitution, a pact of reconciliation, restored freedoms and recognized Spain's diverse regions. Picture a polling station where citizens, young and old, cast votes for the first time, their faces alight with hope. The transition was not flawless. Tensions lingered, and a 1981 coup attempt rattled the young democracy, but Spain endured. By the late 20th century, it joined the European Union, its cities modernizing, its culture blooming anew. Imagine Barcelona's streets, vibrant with Gaudi's architecture, welcoming the world during the 1992 Olympics. Today, Spain is a tapestry of its past. Roman aqueducts, Moorish arches, and modern skylines stand side by side. Picture a festival in Seville, where flamenco dancers spin under lantern-lit skies, their movements echoing centuries of joy and sorrow. The Camino de Santiago still draws pilgrims, their steps a link to medieval devotion. Spain's regions, Catalonia, Basque Country, Andalusia, pulse with distinct voices, their languages and traditions woven into a nation both united and diverse. Imagine a market in Granada, where vendors sell pomegranates and pottery, their smiles a bridge between past and present. Spain's story is one of endurance, a land shaped by conquest, faith, and reinvention. From the caves of Altamira to the streets of modern Madrid, its people have carried their history forward, their hearts as resilient as the mountains. As you drift toward sleep, picture Spain under a starry sky, its rivers flowing, its cities dreaming, its spirit whispering of a journey that never ends. And so, as the stars shine on, Spain's story continues, whispering to those who listen. As the stars hold their quiet vigil over the night, let your mind linger on the shores of Spain, where the waves of history have carved a story as timeless as the sea itself. From the flickering torchlight of Altamira's caves to the vibrant pulse of modern Madrid, Spain's journey has been one of resilience, woven with threads of triumph, sorrow, and rebirth. Picture the land as it sleeps under the same sky that watched Phoenicians sail, Romans march, and poets dream in the courtyards of Al-Andalus. Its mountains stand like silent guardians, its rivers carry whispers of forgotten kings, and its people, through every age, have carried the light of their spirit forward, undimmed by time. This tale of Spain is more than a chronicle of empires and wars. It's a reflection of humanity's endless dance with change. The peninsula has been a crossroads of cultures, a canvas where Iberian tribes, Muslim scholars, Christian knights, and modern dreamers painted their hopes. Each chapter, from the golden glow of Cordoba to the shadowed scars of civil war, speaks to the power of endurance, the beauty of diversity, and the quiet strength found in unity. Imagine walking the Camino de Santiago at dawn, your steps joining those of pilgrims past, each footprint a testament to a shared journey. Spain's story invites you to pause, to breathe, to feel the weight and wonder of a past that still shapes our world. As we close this gentle voyage through time, let the cadence of Spain's history linger, like a lullaby that soothes you into rest. Whether you've drifted through these tales to learn or simply to find peace, know that this is but one thread in the vast tapestry of human stories. Spain sleeps tonight, its cities aglow, its villages quiet, but its legacy whispers on, inviting you to dream of its past and imagine its future. If this journey has wrapped you in calm or sparked a flicker of curiosity, I invite you to stay with me, Sherry, on this channel. Subscribe now, and let's wander through more histories, more stories crafted to soothe your mind and guide you to sleep. Click the bell icon so you never miss a new tale, whether it's the mysteries of ancient lands or the quiet beauty of forgotten moments. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Spain's story touched you most? Or suggest a history you'd love to explore next. If you found peace in these words, give this video a thumbs up to help others discover this bedtime haven. For those who want to linger, check out my Patreon, where exclusive stories and behind-the-scenes moments await, or browse my website for cozy merchandise to bring a touch of history into your nights. Thank you for joining me under these stars. Until our next tale, may your dreams be as rich and restful as Spain's timeless landscapes. Good night, and let's meet again soon.